Good morning, Jethro. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Edith?
I'm really, really well. Thank you so much for your time today, especially on Bank Holiday Monday as well.
Well, it's my last day in a little writing retreat today, so it's a nice way to end it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know as well, someone said, really, are you sure on bank holidays? Like, what are bank holidays? They're not, they don't mean anything to us when
Well,
we
the thing
work in
is,
this industry. Listen, congratulations on your film. I had I really enjoyed it. I just thought there's so much to kind of talk about. It's kind of rich with kind of intrigue and creativity and storytelling and performance as well. So huge congratulations.
thank you. That's really nice. Thank you.
What was the I mean I've read quite a bit about it, but it'd be lovely to hear the story from you about the kind of I guess the catalyst of of the story and of the story in the way that you wanted to tell it, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, it was uh, the the sort of image that had really struck me and stayed with me for years is a well-known photograph of Lee Miller
Mm.
in Adolf Hitler's bathroom, which when you see it, it just, I mean, there's something really disturbing about it. And I know you talked with Kate
I
Winslet
did.
about this. She created it for, she
Yeah.
recreated that scene
For Lee,
for Lee.
yeah.
Um, and so that image has stayed with me. And then one day I was sort of flicking through my phone, and there was an old friend who was in the UK, and he'd posted a photograph of himself. He'd got into Winston Churchill's house and taken a photograph of himself in Winston Churchill's bathtub where he wrote his speeches. And that made me think of the Lee Miller image again. And there's something about that photo which is she'd spent months, years
Mm.
documenting the war behind the lens.
Yeah.
She had her life as a model in Paris and hanging out with Man Ray and being a photographer and mostly known in front of the lens. And then she went behind the camera, and then she took this at the end of the war, the day that Hitler committed suicide. She was in that apartment, and I. The question in my mind is, why did she put herself in the photograph again?
Yeah.
Why did she make herself the subject? Why?
Yeah.
And of course, seeing my friend in Winston Churchill's bathtub made me think about that, wanting to get closer to something, getting in the bath, and that was, and we I think we all understand it, and at the same time we think, oh, maybe there's something
What's the
off
line?
about it,
Yeah.
and where's the line? And
Mm.
that was my starting point. Where is the line, and what if we had two characters who would go to sites where terrible things had happened,
Yeah.
and not just sort of stand there as we do when as tourists and or look at photographs in the museum, but actually try and imagine the scenes of crimes, of executions, of murders, and reenact them in the sites where they happened. And that's how Paul and Paulette were born. The idea was to sort of, I think, start very far back in history. One of the first images that came to me is the opening scene of Paulette sort of walking 5 steps in Place de la Concorde, getting down on her knees, bowing her head and lifting her hair, and trying to get into the shoes of Marie Antoinette at the guillotine. And then I thought, well, if we start all the way back and then sort of slowly work our way towards today, then at some point people are going to go, oh, they're crossing a line. But I
Yeah.
think but my feeling was it would be different maybe for each person where that would be. And I
Yeah, and
sort of yeah.
absolutely. And I also think what's really brilliant about that, because it really makes you, it's really kind of stuck with me and made me think about lots of different things, like where are the places that I've gone to that are kind of either, like I remember being in LA and driving to Marilyn Monroe's house in Brentwood. I was desperate to Helena Drive, where she died. And I knew I wasn't going to get into the house sort of thing as well, but I felt like I just had to go there just because I was a bit obsessed with Marilyn Monroe when I was kind of a teenager and stuff. Which is also kind of, I think, another reason why I really connected with your film, because that she's kind of, she's part of the narrative in it in a very little way, but very kind of has an impact on it. And but then also that thing, like you say, about where different people will find that line, but then also what people will like. I love how with Paul, it's he's crossed the line. He feels that, and you see his in his reaction where they go to the apartment, of connected to the Bataclan, and so that's kind of like it's really powerful that you put his reaction to that being him feeling like that within the film as well. It's really impactful.
Yeah, I think there's something about sort of with Paul, he's sort of a bit bookish, isn't he? And what's the right amount of empathy? If you read it and know it, is that enough? If you
Mm.
and it's sort of it's an unmeasurable thing. Our internal feelings on these things. So yeah, this I think there's a character with him where there's a sort of disconnect where he knows these things, but he hasn't really understood. So
Mm.
I mean, when I sort of wrote that scene in the Bataclan apartment, I was sort of horrified that I knew it had to end up there when it sort of fell on the page. But it's like, how do you deal with that with
Yeah,
sensitivity, and
absolutely.
respect? And yeah, it was a tough scene to write that one. But
I bet. But I think that that's the great thing about film is that it can take you to uncomfortable places and it kind of needs to as well. Do you know what I mean? To kind of to force us to ask ourselves those questions or to even think and consider them.
oh, absolutely, yeah, I think and it's almost what they're doing as well. They're facing up to things. I mean, it's the thing that's in my mind a lot. We watch a lot of films that have a lot of violence and
Mm.
true crime. We are obsessed with it, and these characters are just doing the same as
Mm.
we do when we watch movies, just a little more. So it's my way of sort of questioning those things. Yeah.
And I just love that that's the backdrop for this kind of like really kind of contemporary, sort of romantic road trip in a way as well. It's a breath of fresh air to be honest, because they're also, there's with those things you're never, in life. That's what I think what I love about it as well is like when you start to kind of fall for someone, there's always no one's ever on the same page. One of them's either sort of, you know, you're never kind of running in unison with each other. And I love that because there's moments watching it where you go, oh, they're going to be together. And then it's kind of, and it just feels really honest and really real relationship side of it. And then
Oh,
finding that friendship.
that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a lot of testament to the actors as well. Marie and Jeremy are just, I think they just feel very real and
Yeah.
honest.
Where did
And
you
Marie,
find them?
I just casting on. I mean, it was a completely self-produced film, self-funded, and it was the one thing I knew. I knew I was going to do it no matter what. But the only proviso was I had to find the right actors.
Mm.
But I cast using the sort of websites and pages that people use for short films. But there's so many talented actors out there, really talented actors, that just don't get the opportunity because they're not a well-known name. And it was the
Yeah.
one thing I had with this film, it being self-produced, is I could do it however I wanted and just pick the right two people for the role. And you take time. And I met a lot of actors in the UK and France, but when I saw the two of them together, they were just perfect.
I mean, they're both great, but she's just like, you're like, who are you and where have you been kind of thing. She's extraordinary.
Yeah, she's so unself-conscious. She's she doesn't she's not scared to grimace or look weird, or she's
Yeah.
just there being the character of Paulette. And she's in real life, she's nothing like Paulette at all. She's a very sort
Really?
of quiet. She finds her little corner and reads her book. And oh yeah, she's the easiest, loveliest person in the world to work with. Marie, she's amazing, really. But she just when she's very she said she was she got into acting because she was super shy, and then one day
Oh,
when she was a kid, and then one day she walked up on stage and she realized she could be all these things. I think she just really loves acting for the process. She doesn't care for the limelight. She doesn't care for she's amazing. Love her to bits. Yeah.
yeah. They're both, like you say, it's that chemistry that, yeah, when you see them together, it's like, whoa, it's so it's It's so brilliant. It really, really is. And everything about it, it's kind of like I want her entire wardrobe. I want it's yeah. Oh, and I love how at times as well they're almost like on the same palette, in terms of the costumes and stuff. It's like they're kind of, the idea, how like sometimes if people have got twins, they dress them the same. It's like what it feels like sometimes it's slightly one step removed from that, where it's like similar colors, but not the same outfits, but kind of is in this in it. I really love that about it.
It was it's, Joanna is costume designer, Joanna Wojtowicz, and she's from the cabaret world.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and I sort of know, I've done a lot of music videos with people in the sort of retro vintage
Yeah.
Paris very well, and she sort of she really wanted to be part of the film. I said do the costume, and she had so much fun with Paulette's costumes and Paul's. She had no idea. She had to Google what was it, basic straight white male to see see what he would dress like. But Jeremy bought a few things from his wardrobe, and yeah, it was really fun finding those things. You know where your locations are, and you're like, oh,
Mm,
there's a in the human zoo where she's got this yellow velvet suit on, and
yeah.
it just great. And then Jeremy had this sort of sort of what's the material, sort of um,
Like
uh,
suede.
suede. Yeah, that's it,
Mm,
suede. It's just slightly off color, but when you put them up against these sort of grey statues and green, it just looks amazing. And you just sort of know as you're going along. John had bought all these ingredients and said her principle for Marie was everything had to fit in a suitcase.
yeah.
Everything that she wore during the course of the film would fit in her suitcase. So she mixes and matches, and yeah, it was great fun working on that stuff. Yeah.
You mentioned locations, and two things on that was that kind of reading the kind of bit of production notes on it, and the you were able to get access to filming places that don't normally allow crews to film. But also, I loved how with those locations, you really took us there, and we learned a lot. I was kind of completely like just my jaw hit the floor with the whole kind of human zoo location that you took us to as well. I just was like, what? It was unbelievable. So there's kind of two sort of questions, I guess, in there as well in terms of the research that you did in terms of navigating what you wanted to, what would help and drive the story, the narrative, the relationship, what you were able to get, and then yeah, deciding what you would use in there.
Yeah, we certainly we got everything that I put in the script, and
Wow.
that was just hard work and preparation. I do a lot of organizing shoots for Americans and Brits shooting in France, so I had a
Yeah.
few contacts, but it's really speaking to them early on, pushing to see what you can get away with and what you can't. So there's the conciergerie. They barely let any films shoot in there where Marie Antoinette was incarcerated. So I had a long phone chat with the chap who just happened to be English, who runs the conciergerie, and I was able to sort of tease out of him what things would work and what things wouldn't. And then Père Lachaise cemetery, where where there's the Mur des Fédérés, the Communards Wall, where the
Mm,
Communards were executed, and that they let us in because the story needed to be there. A lot of people asked to shoot there because it's such a beautiful location,
yeah.
but they could see that there was a historical relevance to it,
Yeah.
and so they said, okay, yeah, we'll let you in. Usually they say no to everything, but yeah, and then choosing the sites, it was sort of going through history. It was from a far back, but there were a lot of things like as you're writing, there's a lot of things you want to say, and some of them fall out. You can't
Yeah.
keep everything there, but I think Paris is a great city for it because there's so much history there, so much dark history and
Yeah.
full history. I'm half French and half British, and much like Britain, there's a really awful colonial history, and I don't think we talk about those things enough
Yeah.
in France or in Britain, and so I wanted them to go to those places that would sort of just confront
Hmm.
ourselves with that. And so that they just seemed like very pertinent places. And the ones that tended to stay in the script, because there were lots more I could have explored, were the ones where I could really find something that Paul and Paulette could play with, where
Yeah.
the scenes they could recreate.
It's
And I
such an, I had this conversation where we were on family holiday, and we were in Germany actually, at this in this kind of national park called Eifler, and we saw a sign for a museum for a Nazi training camp museum, and I was kind of like I was really torn about whether it was something that we should go to or not, sort of thing. And it's kind of I think that that's a really interesting conversation. I think another thing that your film kind of made me think about was like how important these places are to make sure that the stories are still told, but it's about knowing whether they're being told in the honest, kind of truthful way, the right way that as that we need to hear now, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of something I read about the human zoo location is it's you sit in the film a bit, but it's really in a state of decay,
Mm.
um, and I think they don't know what to do. They didn't know what to do with it. If
Yeah,
they were to um, to take it apart, that would be erasing history.
yeah,
If they were if they were to renovate it, that would be glorifying history. What's really bothered me is the thing that Paul says in the film is that it doesn't say any. There's all these little plaques saying this was the Congolese villa, this was the Ile de la Réunion villa,
yeah,
but it doesn't say really what happened there.
yeah,
Um, that's, I mean, that's why I comment on it because it shocked me that they don't put it out
yeah.
there. And it's, I mean, the Hitler's apartment thing. The truth is, we could never have filmed in there because now a police station because they
Mm.
didn't want it to become a sort of site um, for tourism.
Yeah.
Now that said, we when I was location scout, we went up to the is it called the Eagle's Nest in Austria,
Mm-hmm.
where Hitler had a house, and there are buses pulling up to go and see this place, and there is something
Yeah.
really off about it. And at the same time, do we can't ignore it.
Yeah.
And is it is going there just a way to remember and to remind ourselves that these things shouldn't happen,
Mm.
uh, shouldn't happen again. You
Yeah.
know,
It was so weird because we were on holiday before I'd seen the film, and then the film kind of was like, oh my God, I had this kind of weird thing where we saw this music. We didn't go in the end, but it was kind of like I was just, yeah, I was really torn about like those things that you just mentioned of kind of, yeah, yeah, it was very bizarre. Right, music. I've got to talk to you about music because I know that music was part of the journey of even writing this for you and your relationship with Mark Tasso and basically like loading up a hard drive with his music.
yeah, that's right. Mark something. I love Mark. He's been in Paris for about 40 since the 80s, I think. And I met him. I was looking for somebody to do a British voice, British 1950s radio voice for a short film I'd made.
Yeah.
And after that, he sent me a few songs. I thought these are completely balmy. These songs they're really weird, dark, kind of sexy. And I just sort of made a little mental note. And over the years, we became friends. I'd go to a few of his gigs in these
Mhm.
little jazz bars in Paris, and and when the idea came to me for Paul and Paulette, I just thought, oh, it's got to be Mark's music. So I showed up at his house with a hard drive and said, I'm making a feature film. I want everything you've ever written. He put everything. He put demos on, literally every
Really?
different version, which is great because then you could pick out the right, the one that had the right tempo or the right feel, and say, no, 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 we don't want this polished version. This little stripped
Mm.
down version
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And yeah, I just listened as I was writing. I just listened to everything and slowly whittled down a playlist, but also just sort of wove its way into the film. So every every track except for one which we stitched out in the edit, but every track was written into the script, and which is great because you can get to set you can play that to your crew and they get the vibe and the
Hmm.
feel, the cast, um, you know what it's going to be, and I think his music sort of informed my writing as well. Sort of
Mm.
sometimes dared me to go a bit further, or I'm sure on that sort of road trip scene. Because I think I can just remember the beats of those drums kicking in, and it just called out for that moment where they get get on the road, and there's a sort of sunshine and the wind blowing in their hair, and and I think it really, and I think also some of the sort of darker, weirder lyrics in his music. I think the cabaret scene might not have been there if it wasn't for his songs that really spoke to that.
And is
Uh,
that them in the cabaret scene?
yeah, that's Mark singing, and that's the other advantage. Is I knew we were going to have the music, so I could put him in the scene singing with his band. They called the Chamber Pop Consort. He didn't know what to call his music, and eventually he stumbled on this phrase chamber pop, and so he called himself the Mark Tassel and the Chamber Pop Consort. So that's who we're seeing playing. And the great Elena, is a sort of Russian concert pianist. Gonzag's a jazz. Well, actually, he used to play double bass in the band, and then he wanted to play drums, so he moved to drums, and then he got Pascal in for the. Yeah, they're terrific. I just like there's such a band of rapscallions. They're
That's
lovely to
great.
bits.
And then there's a couple of other pieces of music as well, isn't there? There's like Cleo Lane. Um,
Yeah, boy. Oh, what's the refrain? And all my sorrow, all my joy came from loving a thieving boy. And actually, that was on Mark's hard drive. He'd done a cover of it. So at first, I thought it was one of his songs,
yeah.
and then I heard there was another version with a female voice with this weird bits of clanging and stuff in there. And he goes, "Oh no, I didn't write that one. That's a Cleo Lane track." And it was at the beginning of a 1960s film called The Criminal, I think.
Hmm.
And so I tracked down the rights because I knew I wanted that song in there. And what was tricky was we couldn't get the master of that version. There are
Yeah.
a bunch of wonderful versions that Cleo Lane recorded of it, but they all sort of become a bit big. And there's something in that version that's very sort of melancholy. It feels like that person who sat in a prison cell, really.
Yeah.
And so I went. In the end, we got the rights to use the song, but we couldn't get the master we wanted. So I went to Julien Decoré, who composed the score, all of the bits of art songs, who I've worked with for years and love working with him. I said to him, can we do our own version of this? And he knew a singer called Phoebe Kildare who played with a band called Nouvelle Vague
Yeah.
back in the day. Julien plays a lot with that band,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's amazing. He's got a lot of different projects that are worth checking out. June Moon, if you ever get a chance to listen to
Okay,
June
I'm
Moon,
writing
and
this down. Hold on. June Moon.
acoustic
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, he called up Phoebe and said, "Can you do a vocal for us?" And so we got just the right vibe to sort of have playing on the radio in the car, and it was
Yeah. Because that's the thing, isn't it, with road trips? I immediately associate music, whether it's I always try and tune into a local radio station. So wherever you are, you get a kind of sense of kind of the musical palette almost, or you'll make a playlist or that kind of thing as well. Was that when you were kind of deciding kind of musically what that part of the film would be? Yeah, how did you navigate that, in terms of the road trip specifically?
Oh, the road trip. Well, I always write with a playlist. It's
Mm.
a great way of for me. It's just sort of because if you sort of put a script down for a couple of weeks, but you just put the music back on and you're just right back in it.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, this some of the songs. I mean, sometimes I find songs of Mark's that were just too perfect. They
Yeah.
just sort of felt like it was just
Yeah.
too on the nose, and I was like, I'd love to use this, but I can't. And you just it's too, like, okay, this is just like trying to get into Paul's head. And so you're always trying to find things that are sort of complementary rather than on the nose. And
Mm.
that road trip, I don't know, I was just listening as I was writing, and it was just like, this is right, this is
Yeah.
the right feel, this is the right vibe. And again, the nice thing is when you're working with somebody like Mark, if I needed to do a bit where, okay, we just need to take the vocals out here, he'd have all the stems and we can just like play with it. And I don't suppose you get, unless you've got a massive Hollywood budget, I don't suppose you get the opportunity to play with
Mm.
tracks that way. it so much. I think there was one song, the song that we switched out. There was, the lyrics were a bit too. They took us out of the film a bit. So I just
Yeah.
said to Mark, could you just write something else for this? And he recorded another verse for us. And
Wow.
it's just such a lovely way to work. Yeah.
And what about then kind of with Julian in terms of those moments where you needed score as such and it working, there has to be a synergy between when there is, unless you want that kind of deliberate kind of like gear shift or whatever and stuff. But what were the conversations about what you needed from him and in terms of, especially since you'd sat with Mark's music for such a big part of this process and it was so kind of entwined in it.
Yeah, that was I mean, the first thing. Obviously, I had to play everything for Julien. I always knew I was going to work with him, but it wasn't until we had a sort of first cut that we started working with him. And so
Yeah.
he could see where we were using tracks, and we would put, okay, we think we need something here, something here. And Julien was really, for him, it was really important to get the first track right, the
Yeah.
opening music over those postcards, and that took us a while because I don't have a very good music vocabulary. I know when it's right.
Yeah.
Um, and he would send me things, and I go, okay, let's try this. And I'd send him probably too far in one direction or another. And then one day he was like, oh, how about this? And he pulled out a song that he'd written for a band. It was a song with lyrics, and he'd just taken the lyrics off.
Mm,
And I was like, that's it. And once he had that, then he understood the tone for the rest of the film.
mm.
And a lot of it, I mean, it doesn't, a lot of it is really quite sparse what he's doing. It's really just setting. There's a lot of drones and setting the atmosphere and building, ramping up the tension and that sort of sense of unease with what they're doing. You've got to sort of say to the audience, on the one hand, you don't want to sort of prescribe too much, but
Yeah.
the filmmaker, you've got to let people know that this isn't quite right what they're doing here, or
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
something a bit off. And so I think he really found that balance
Mm.
um, beautifully. And I just love sitting in his room. I mean, he collects all these old crazy instruments and stuff like that. And he'll sort of pick his palette out, and I said, I think we're using this and this and this, and but sitting there, because I've got, I mean, I would sort of, what's the word? I'm horrified at my lack of musical talent. But sitting in a room with somebody like Julien and hearing him play something and just being able to say, "Oh, could we?" I think it needs a little more of this, and he's like, "Oh, you mean this?" And then he plays. It's one of the great joys in life.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I like music is magic to me. I
Yeah.
don't know
Same.
how they do it, but I love it, and I love being in that room. It's just yeah, one of the great joys.
But that's the wonderful thing. I mean, you've done such a great job with this film is knowing where to place what, in a way and what's needed where, because like you say, music has that ability to kind of take us places and make us feel things that we're not asking for. It's kind of doing it before we even kind of know it is in a way. And so that is such a and and people don't always get it right, but it's that kind of thing of it's such a fine line, isn't it, of kind of it being part of the story and so important to the story, but not giving anything away and not telling us how we should feel. And yeah, I mean, and because there is so much music in the film, it's beautifully and delicately crafted and sculpted around the story and the characters. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's a what's the word? I think with music, you just know when it's right. I mean, for me, you know,
Feel it.
you can know things and it feels right,
Mm.
and we've also seen things where like, oh, this isn't quite, and and especially when you're in the editing room and you're trying something and it's off, it just it can
Yeah.
crush you completely, and then you just keep working until you
Mm.
find the right bits and the right tone and everything. I love that process.
What's next? Do you know?
I've got two at the moment. I'm currently in a town that's in the middle of France. It's built around a hole, and it's a place that again, it's one of those images that sticks with you. It's all these
Mm.
cliffs and all the buildings just perched around the edge, and I always knew I
Wow.
wanted I wanted to do something there, and then I found the right idea. And
Great.
yeah, and it's sort of let's say it's it's got a bit big chill vibes. The an old friends coming back
Oh, great.
with a sort of slightly dark science fictiony twist to it. I won't say more than that.
Oh, great. We'll
But
come back for visit two, please, will you, Jethro?
oh, absolutely.
Um, I'm really so thrilled we get the chance to celebrate and talk about Paul and Paulette. Because I just yeah, it's so great. It really, really is. It's kind of really, it's really stuck with me. They've really stuck with me as well, and I think that yeah, that's a sign of a brilliant film. So huge congratulations. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to part two.
Thank you, Edith. Great chatting with you. Really
You
lovely.
too. Take care. Have a great day. Safe travels.